A very good afternoon to you, and thanks for joining our latest webinar in our NEXUS series. And it's around about apps positively enabling the lives of disabled people. My name is Jaya Calder from High, and before I pass on to my colleague Andrea, I'll just spend a minute advising how you can actually get actively involved in the webinar. If this is your first time using GoTo, when you come in as an attendee, you're automatically on mute, but we actively encourage your involvement. And there are a couple of ways that we can do that. You'll see a question box. Now, please make full use of this question box throughout the session this afternoon, either with observations or questions. And you'll also see an icon that looks like a raised hand icon. Now, when we come to the Q&A session, click on that, and if you have a mic and we've got time, we'd be happy to take you off mute and speak directly with our panelists this afternoon. And the last thing just to advise is we're recording this afternoon session just to share the information and collaborate as widely as possible. So let's start off and pass over to Andrea. Andrea.
Thanks, Jaya, and thanks everyone for joining today. I just want to do a quick welcome before we hand over to Gavin. So I'm Andrea McCall. I work in the Life Sciences team at Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And I'm introducing this NEXUS webinar today. It's part of a series, and the NEXUS webinars are all about an opportunity to hear about what's going on in the life sciences and technology community and to make connections with each other. Our NEXUS co-working space is located in Solasta House on Inverness campus, and that's a physical space where life sciences and technology companies can co-locate and collaborate. And the project is funded by the Inverness City Region Deal and ERDF funding as well. But now I just want to welcome Gavin, the founder and CEO of Neatebox. And I'm delighted to have him here with us today. He's lived in many different places, but he has lived in Old Bay as well in the Highlands, and his family is based on the West Coast. So great to have you here today and giving us a little bit of an insight into Neatebox, your company that offers smart solutions based on the challenges that disabled people face every day. So you have a couple of apps that you can tell us a little bit more about, and also about running a business in the tech for good space. So without further ado, handing over to Gavin.
Great stuff. Firstly, Kimura Ha, everyone. That's pretty much all my Gaelic, but in case anybody out there has the Gaelic, I think that's the way of actually referring to it, is having the Gaelic. Anyway, so my name is Gavin Neat, and for 18 years, I was a guide dog mobility instructor in Forfar and then Edinburgh. But my childhood was, as Andrea said, was actually up on the northwest coast of Scotland before moving to central Scotland as a youth. So I know the Highlands incredibly well, which is why I was very happy to come along and present today. So yeah, Gavin Neat, my company is called Neatebox, as you'll see there in front of you. Neatebox was an idea that came from me once when I was working for Guide Dogs for the Blind. And actually worked for Guide Dogs for about 18 years. But very early on in my time working for Guide Dogs for the Blind, training people how to use guide dogs, I recognized that a lot of people were using, or a lot more people were using technology. And I started getting interested in how technology was going to be helping the people that I was working with or wanted to work with. So this is me back in the day, as I say, a guide dog mobility instructor. And what you can see here is me standing between Murray and a pedestrian crossing. And the challenge Murray had was, once he got to the curb edge with his guide dog, was pressing the button at the pedestrian crossing. So how would Murray find that button? He had the tactile pavement that he was standing on, but it was very, very challenging for him to get all the way up to the pole. And I was thinking to myself from 1996 onwards, well, why is that? Why is the pole so far away? When Murray wants to cross this road, he can't use the accessibility features that have been put in place. He can't press the button and then hear the beep, 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 beep. And I just thought to myself, one day I wonder if the phone could press the button. And that was it. That was the start. That was my snowball being made at the top of the hill. And then somebody came along who was a friend of mine who went, you need to do something about that because nobody's doing anything about that. So I looked at inventing the world's first pedestrian crossing operated by smartphones, which is ultimately what took me to, and this is a video, but I think it'll play a video. This took me to actually invent a pedestrian crossing operated by smartphones. And I'll start it running. Wow. Like this time. So when it goes, you've pressed the button. Okay, when that changes, it will be because of you.
You won't have to do anything. Just let it happen, yeah?
Wow. When it changes.
You press the button, dude. There you go. Yes!
One of the things that I had realized was that you could use technology to help people in loads and loads of different ways. So what we've got here is another problem that disabled people had, and specifically Ken. I walk into shops, I stand there, I wait, holding my cane in my hand, and nobody came to talk to me, so I walk straight back out again. That is basically the situation that disabled people find themselves in on a regular basis across the whole of the United Kingdom. In fact, 75% of disabled people have had poor customer service and left a shop. You think to yourself, well, that's how many people is that? Well, there are 1.3 billion disabled people in the world. 75% of the people in the UK have hidden disabilities. We have 13 million disabled people in the United Kingdom. Their spending power, the money they spend every single year, is around about 250 billion pounds a year. So I was in a situation where I had recognized that disabled people were getting poor customer service and weren't able to actually spend money in shops. And this was the situation we found ourselves in. This is where we are currently, or this is where we were. There is an incident, a complaint on social media normally, there's probably an apology. They then do this, staff training. They train people how to interact with disabled people. And of course, that remains in people's brains for a certain amount of time. You guys live in a part of the world where there's a lot of tourism. You work in tourism. If somebody works in tourism, there's a chance that it'll be seasonal work. They'll be there for a year and then they move on. So what happens is the passage of time and then there's another incident. And it just goes round and round and round in circles. And I just thought, well, wouldn't it be good if the mobile phone could explain what was happening and then help people? So I invented a system whereby the mobile phone could travel into a geofence and information that had been placed on the mobile phone would instantly be transferred to the customer service team within the building that the person was traveling to. Remarkably, this then became the first proximity-aware staff training platform in the world. Think about that from the point of view of the disabled person. I walk into a shop and I have no idea if somebody's going to discriminate against me or not, if I can get in the shop. Now think about it from the point of view of the person who's in the shop. Oh my goodness me, there's a disabled person, I don't know what to do. Using this system, when the person's 5 minutes away from the building, the person inside gets a message to say, Gavin's just about to walk through the door. Gavin would like you to know that he is living with a condition called cerebral palsy or ataxia or dementia or dyslexia or stammering or, well, anything really. And here is how to interact. So here's a visit. We'll just very quickly, I'll take you through a live demo, but I'm going to show you this. I put information on my phone to say, this is what I need. I then go through into the system. It gives me an overview of, in this situation, Huntington's disease. I then have top tips on how to interact with somebody with Huntington's disease. I then have a link to the charity that gave us all of the information. So 3 links that would take you straight to the actual charity. And then I have question responses, which is information that I've asked them in an event or before they've actually popped through the door. And this was, obviously when I put it in, it was down to an airport that I did it. I would then hit accept, and that would send a message back to Gavin. We installed this at Edinburgh Airport, and this was a video that STV did for us at Edinburgh Airport.
Now, an app which aims to help disabled people get the services and support they need in shops, venues and transport hubs has teamed up with Edinburgh Airport to assist passengers. The technology uses GPS to alert staff that the customer is en route, giving them time to prepare for their visit and make any special arrangements. Kay Nicholson has more.
Ken Reid lost his sight 30 years ago. Over the decades, getting around has become easier, but there are still issues.
I'm fairly mobile. I walk a lot of places and I can walk the streets that I know quite comfortably, but finding a venue and getting into that venue and then getting the service that I require when I arrive at that venue, that's the challenges. I've stood there and basically had to shout, will somebody come and help me? And it's very degrading when you have to do that. Making that last 50-metre connection between your journey and arriving at your final destination is closing that loop that makes the whole difference.
That's where the new Welcome app comes in. It allows people to set up a personal profile which alerts a venue when they're en route and outlines what they require when they get there.
Oh, Mr. Reid, Hello there.
Hello,
Hi.
Lisa. You're your assistant today. How are you?
The big picture here is we're all humans, we're exactly the same, we should all be equal, we should be treated equally, and everybody should be equal by default. So it's equality by default that we're aiming for within the service that we offer.
Edinburgh Airport has become the first Scottish airport to register with it.
If we can use technology to help us understand the needs of individual groups, and of course disabled have got most pressing needs, and certainly the ones we need to support and want to support as much as we can, then we can just keep offering better service.
Right,
Hi there.
your boarding pass handy?
I've got it here. There we go.
The Scottish Government is encouraging other businesses to follow suit.
What we need is more and more people to know about this app and to want to use it, and then to place demands on the companies and businesses that offer services that they should have it so that individuals can have that accessibility.
It's hoped this new link with Edinburgh Airport will encourage other venues to take it on board, empowering hundreds of people like Ken to live as independently as possible. Kay Nicholson, STV News, Edinburgh Airport.
This is not just a company that is just telling you that it's doing something. This is a company that is doing something. These are just some of the clients that have already bought up to this platform. You can see Edinburgh Airport on there, but we've also got charities as small as Headway in Ireland, but then massive organisations like the Scottish Government, Scottish Parliament, the NHS, Dundee Council, Stirling Council, Visit Scotland, who already have this. Northlink Ferries have it in all of their terminals. So if you're a disabled person, you can then link into Northlink Ferries and actually get services in exactly the way we're talking about here. That's the app. It's free. You download it, the venue pays for the service, and it means that all disabled people get a much more inclusive experience when they walk through the door. I mean, the important thing here is not that some technology came along to solve people's problems, but the technology started from somebody who was trained in something completely different. My subject matter, my expertise in the subject matter led me to devising the solution, and I'm fairly certain there'll be people out there right now listening to this now or later down the line who are just going, yeah, I've always had a problem with this, wouldn't it be good if? And that wouldn't it be good if leads us down a path. If somebody can help us and mentor us, like Highlands and Islands support, where we can then bring that to fruition. I used Business Gateway and Scottish Enterprise, and they helped me get this solution out there. And I think ultimately what we all need to do is find the people around us who can champion what we do, but also support us. And the most important thing there from my point of view is understanding you need support. Understanding that you can surround yourself with experts who are the people that can actually help you deliver. Don't think you need to or have to do it all on your own. Find champions and find mentors and find the organisations that can actually support you. There's a great organisation called Scottish Edge, which is free money, and you can actually apply for Scottish Edge. We won Scottish Edge a couple of years ago and got a small amount of money, but it was definitely of support to us. And don't think for a second it can't come from Highlands and Islands. And don't think for a second that something that starts in Scotland or the Highlands and Islands or Orkney, Shetland, wherever, can't affect people in South America and Australia and China. We need to be thinking of ourselves like we did in the old days of Scotland being an international a breeding ground for international ideas. I'm very happy to answer any questions now if anybody has any.
Okay, over to our audience. This is your opportunity to either pop a question in the question box, or what would be great is if you use your raised hand icon and let me take you off mute and let's have a conversation with Gavin regarding that. So there's a couple of ways that you can get involved. Use your raised hand or a question. While we're waiting for that to come in, can I come back to Andrea? Because I know that you got a question before the webinar started, Andrea, about potential barriers.
Yes, I did. I was wondering, when you obviously approach venues or companies to, with a view for them to buy your product, what do they say to you? Are there any kind of usual barriers or challenges they put to you and say, oh, well, this wouldn't work for us because X, Y, Z, or are they actually all really easily convinced, I suppose, that there is a reason why they should be offering this to their customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the very start, when somebody said to me, this wouldn't work for us, I would be trying to sell it to them and say, no, but you need this. This is going to be. But now I walk away from those people. We have enough people coming to us to actually provide services. And I think I split them into 4 categories. I said, you've got dinosaurs who are never going to change, ever. You're going to have early adopters who are going to go, yeah, I'm up for it, let's do it. You're going to have adopters who are going to have to watch other people do it first, and you've got late adopters who are going to have to watch loads of other people do it first. So now I recognize what the buying signals are. Does somebody understand it fundamentally and say, yes, we need to improve services? If I say to somebody, 75% of disabled people have said they've had poor customer service. The 13 million disabled people in the United Kingdom spend 240 billion pounds or 250 billion pounds a year on services you provide, and 75% of disabled people have hidden disabilities, and the person says, not really something for us. They are definitely not the person I'm going to convince. Whereas if they say, yes, this is massive for us, we cannot afford to turn away 20% of the people who might buy from us. So yes, of course we're interested in doing that. And if we look at big business right now, if we look at Microsoft, Google, we look at all these guys, they are all banking, they are all doing their utmost to try to appeal and provide services for vulnerable customers. Look at shopping centers, supermarkets. They are all saying you can do online shopping, you can do this. Yes, we train our staff. Yes, we do this. Yes, we do that. Yes, we do Braille. Yes, we do. We will do accessibility and inclusion in everything that we put out there. The world changed. Anybody who is not into that, I don't want to talk to them. They need to learn, and then they can come and talk to me.
I know, obviously you're in a great position. You know, if you can, if you have so much interest that you can choose to work with the people who, easy to work with and who understand what you're trying to do, that makes it easier. What's the type of feedback like that you get from the actual staff that are working at the venues? You know, who are now hopefully finding it easier to interact with customers when they come in.
Well, there's a fantastic model which, if you cut the screen into a cross of 4, it's unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, or you know the one, and then conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. The problem we have in a lot of, it's like talking to a blacksmith in 1820 and saying, what's the fastest way from getting to A to B? Well, it's a horse. There were no trains, certainly no cars, certainly no planes. They were unconscious of there being the potential. Then when something came along, cars exist, trains came along, but the person has never heard of them, they're still going to say that horses are the best way to get across. So what we had to do to start with, educate. But as you educate, you then have people going, yeah, we need to do that. So what we found was that initially people said, yeah, we're great at customer service. And then I would very easily knock that out of the water by saying, right, you've just met somebody who's blind. What's the first thing you do? Or I would leave that hanging. I would leave it for 5 seconds. What's the first thing you do when you meet somebody blind? Not one of them ever got it right. And you just go, and I did a talk to 100 people in one room at the same time. Not one person was confident enough to say, I would introduce myself. I would say, hello, my name is Michael. Not one person said that. And I could then just say, you're not very good at customer service because you don't know where you're not doing a good job. Now, if you're wearing a name badge in a bank and somebody comes in and somebody says, oh, I can see you're called Michael. But if somebody comes in and the person hasn't introduced themselves and they're blind, they can't see it's Michael, you've just discriminated against them by not telling them who you are. And that's a really simple one. 75% of disabled people have hidden disabilities. So imagine you're in your shop and you're behind your counter and somebody comes in to buy a coffee and says, hello, my name's Michael, I have schizophrenia. What would you do? How would that affect how you serve that person? Either I'm dyslexic. How would that affect you? Well, with app welcome, you'd know 5 minutes before they walk through the door.
No, so it's great that they have, you know, just a notice, I suppose, and a little bit of information is all you need to make people a bit more comfortable.
And the staff member.
We have a member of our audience, Louise, that I would like to take off mute and speak directly with us. Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, Louise.
Hello, thank you very much for taking my question. It's concerning how the notification gets to the people. I assume it could be a variety of ways, text, email, whatever. To me, I suspect one of the biggest issues is not the technology delay or anything like that. It's whether the person at the venue is watching that. Because if you have a staff member and they're working for somebody and the boss says, right, I need you to watch that, they also need to be doing other things. Yeah, so have issues with it not being watched.
So is that a question as to how it works? Or...
Well, the notification, somebody will get a text and an email to say, I am turning up at your venue in 5 minutes.
No, it doesn't work like that. There's a 2-hour window. So you have to have booked in inverted commas 2 hours before you actually turn up. You can't just walk through the door. You could potentially in the future, when the business does a really good job and understands how they should interact, but you can say that you're going up to 2 weeks in advance, but only with a 2-hour window. Also, as soon as you say you're going, a message goes to the venue and they get an automated phone call, a text message, or an email. We haven't sorted out the carrier pigeon through the window yet, but we do absolutely everything we can in order to do this. Also, when the venue buys into it, they assign this to a person in that shop, so you'll know the day before. So in that morning when you turn up, it's part of the process to take 5 minutes that morning to learn about a particular condition that somebody might have when they walk through the door. Obviously, that little bit of learning is taking the place of trying to do what would be called traditional staff training in the past. Certainly, I can speak from experience as to all the places where this is put in, where it's working already, and the buy-in from the venue is such that they go, yeah, this is just a different way of doing stuff. And yes, we are engaged with it.
I think for me, one of the issues might be, say I'm travelling from where I live in the north of Scotland down to Edinburgh. I haven't got a clue where my route's going to take me, and I'm in my wheelchair and I'm perambulating along, and I see a shop and think, oh, I'd quite like to go in there.
Yeah,
So,
and you should be able to go in anywhere that you want. Of course you should. Everybody should be able to go in absolutely everywhere. And they should be able to go in without staff getting any training at all. Everybody in society should know how to interact with absolutely everybody else. I totally believe that. However, all children should learn by the age of 15 to speak French, and then they should be able to learn French and then know it for the rest of their lives. But we need to remind people, if they want to learn a foreign language, you need to be using something. We need to give people an aide-memoire. Ultimately, let's just say that somebody who lived local to that particular shop was using Welcome, and they used that 5 times that month. Well, whether you're using Welcome or not, when you go through that door, you're going to get better customer service because another member of society used the app. This is about staff training as much as you actually getting exactly what you want when you walk through the door. Obviously, if you go through the door and you're in a wheelchair, the last thing you would want is somebody to come up and touch your wheelchair. It's a little bit of a no-no, but there's a lot of staff members that wouldn't know that. But if somebody was using Welcome in that particular vicinity and they knew that, then they're going to interact with you in a better way than they had done before.
yeah, I think what you're saying is the more notice that you can give, then it's going to be slightly easier. I'm a bit of an impromptu person. When I go to Edinburgh, I kind of pop into coffee shops, things like that. I have to say, my experience is that aspect of how people deal with you, if they're not used to dealing with disabled people, actually is better than, say, 2 years ago. You know,
yeah, it's
so
definitely improving. It's definitely improving.
but I like your idea, and I think everybody should have it.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. We were invited by Google to be mentored by them this year. We're now in so many venues. Irish Rail and Deloitte, Diageo have got it. Scottish Parliament have got it. Royal Bank of Scotland have got it. And it's got about 70 venues across the UK. And we're the first company in the world to ever do it. So there's a lot of interest in this proximity-aware staff training that enables everybody to learn about how they should interact. It's very difficult to learn everything, especially in seasonal. A 19-year-old doesn't understand about ataxia, say, for instance, or acquired brain injury, or how they should respond. But what we're doing is we're doing that staff training so that they can.
I'm also interested to know, I can imagine a lot of places have it in Edinburgh. I live in Thurso, the most northerly town on the Scottish mainland. Is there anywhere in the Highlands and Islands that has it other than in Inverness?
So well, Inverness doesn't have it. Certainly the Northlink ferry terminals have it, but this is the secret for me. I'm all about empowerment of the individual. Within the app, you can request venues. So let's just say that you wanted it in a local shop in Thurso, or council buildings, or swimming pool, or health centre, or hospital, or train station. You would go into the app and request it. That comes directly to us. We then contact that venue and say, we've had 1, 2, 5, 10, 1,000 people say they want this, and it's going to cost you £30 a month to have it. Would you like to put a trial on for a year to see how well people respond to it? And interestingly, instead of it being 10,000 signed petition, we had one person walk into House of Fraser, stood there, didn't get any service, walked out again, requested it. 4 months later, it was installed in House of Fraser.
Well, you're going to see some action from the north.
Oh, do you know what? I want it in the Highlands. For goodness sake, we need it in the Highlands, and it can't just be Northlink Ferries that do it. And it's totally free. This is a free app. The venue pays for it.
Louise, thank you so much for your contribution. It is absolutely great. Now I'm going to come to a question that has come through the question panel. Great talk. How easy is it for the disabled people to use the app?
It's a super question. Well, my background was visual impairment, so we made sure that for a start it was VoiceOver compatible. So VoiceOver is the technology within Apple, but it's also on TalkBack with Samsung or Android phones, and we made sure it was totally compatible. All the design of the app has been made as much of a compromise as it could be when you consider we cover all disabilities within the app. So we had to make it as good as it could be. That said, we're always improving it, so we want to do a lot more icons in the future. There's the text that is in there is very short and hopefully very succinct, but the idea here is it's completely compatible. Remember, my background is disability, not technology. A lot of people who come up with technological solutions, they go, right, solution first, and then they think about who's using it later. And of course, my market research was 18 years of working in visual impairment and indeed visually impaired people in wheelchairs and the like. So yeah, compatibility is massive for us. And if you go to our website and check that out, neatebox.com, then you'll see how accessible that is. And then, of course, try the app out, which is welcomed by Neatebox if you're looking on the App Store.
Thanks, Gavin. Another couple of questions. Should we be talking about design for accessibility or just good design?
That's a super question as well. These are great questions today. So if we're building something new, we should definitely make sure it's totally accessible. Obviously, if we have somewhere that isn't accessible, we then need to retrofit. And quite obviously, if you're looking at a grade 1 listed building, it's very difficult to put in a lift, say, for instance. But we then need to either think about not using that facility for universal. If it was a tourism site, for instance, we can't not avoid using it. So we need to make sure that the services we provide are available to everybody. So if you've got a castle, Urquhart Castle is a great example of this. You've got a fantastic path all the way around Urquhart Castle, which may or may not be accessible to somebody in a wheelchair, depending on how much energy they've got to get around. But if you had somebody walk around the castle explaining the buttresses and the turrets and the history and things like that, and the loch, if you had somebody doing that, as opposed to being able to go into the castle and actually go around the castle, well, you've at least made some effort towards making it accessible. Now that's a retrofit, but it's possible. But yes, we should be designing from the very start as to how things should be done. But I'm always a massive proponent of making sure that it's not just about access, is not just about physical world, it's about the social world as well. So you can have the most accessible building in the entire world, but if the security guard comes up to you and says no dogs allowed because you've got an assistance dog, well, that building might as well be totally inaccessible. We need to make sure that the security guard knows what an assistance dog is and how to interact with somebody who has one, which can be staff training, but if you can do it in the moment, you can do it 5 minutes before or the day before the person walks through the door, all the better.
Thanks. Okay, we're turning to the area of GDPR now. And how do you deal with GDPR issues on your app in your company, but also how do the venues deal with GDPR issues?
Yeah, so, well, the venues are all individual and every venue has to look at that themselves. As a company, you have to protect yourselves from their GDPR issues. It's like Barclaycard saying when you handed over a Barclaycard and somebody then copied it and then started spending on your credit card, is it Barclaycard's fault or is it the shop's fault? So the shop has to be responsible for that aspect of it. As far as we were concerned, when we started the app, we went through, you have to have a platform that you host, it's hosted on. So it might be a Microsoft platform or AWS, which is another platform that's Amazon owned. They have GDPR compliance that you have to be able to say that you are ticking those boxes. When we looked at what our GDPR compliance was, we were saying, well, the information we're getting, and it is all GDPR information, but because it's free, we don't need credit cards. Because it's just about the individual, we don't need to know where somebody lives. When we talk about disability, we never mention the word disability or disabled. We say, what would you like customer service to have awareness of? Now, that is all information that is covered under GDPR, and we are GDPR compliant, and we made sure we were GDPR compliant when we released the app. Information that's handed across to the venue is only accessible by particular people within that venue. So therefore, the venue has to take responsibility for those individuals in the same way they would for making sure somebody didn't take away a card and then take that. However, the information that a person gets when they're turning up at the venue will just be, what does the person look like? what would they like you to have awareness of, what is their name, or how would they like to be addressed? And everything else is covered by the system. Didn't have time to go into the system, but what the system does is it gives an overview of a condition or went into this slightly, and top tips. And those top tips are the same, as pertinent to Louise's question. It's the same for anybody in a wheelchair, or indeed anybody with cerebral palsy, or anybody with autism. They're so generalized. And the reason we know that they're useful is because all of the information came from the charities that represent the people. Doesn't mean they're perfect. Sometimes they could be improved, and we're very happy to take feedback and improve them.
Thanks. Next question is looking at barriers and opportunities being the flip side of the same coin. So in the next year, what would be the key things that you are looking at, both as an opportunity, but also as a barrier, and overcoming that to make it the opportunity?
I need to come back to the Highlands. These are the best questions ever. Seriously, you guys rock. So barriers and opportunities. So let's look at the most obvious one. It's not even an elephant in the room. It's like a dinosaur in the room. It's COVID. COVID is an absolutely dire situation, and many of my friends have been affected personally. I know have a lot of disabled friends, and they've lost family members, or they've been in danger themselves. They've had to be shielded, and they're vulnerable, and I hate the word vulnerable, but they are vulnerable because they go outside, just like all of us who can catch this condition, but they're more vulnerable because if they caught it, it could kill them. And there is a massive barrier there, but there's also this amazing opportunity for innovation. And if we look at the history of humankind, we look at that history, we can see where innovation has had its greatest opportunities. Wars, plagues, pestilence, all these kind of things give us amazing opportunities to advance knowledge. And if we look at the Second World War, after the Second World War, the NHS came along, and it's obviously an emotive subject, but that was because people came back from the war and said, we need something that is going to be for us, for the people in this country, that it will be something that we can say we've got no matter what. So there is amazing opportunity within barriers or within problems, but there is also the opportunity to say that we need to fix the problems that are now facing us. So barriers for us coming up in the next year are getting the message out there, but the message is gathering pace. When I first started, nobody knew this was a problem. In fact, the most famous quote ever, which apparently he didn't say, but it's too good to not quote, which was Henry Ford saying, if I'd asked them what they'd have wanted, they would have said faster horses. Of course, Henry Ford then had to go out there and sell cars. Not easy with the early cars, because they weren't better than horses. But the truth is that you need to educate people. That's a massive barrier. Louise now knows about us where she didn't know about it before, and she's saying Thursday can have this now because I know about it. Well, the barrier for me was Louise not knowing about it. The opportunity for me was coming on and talking to you guys. Now, I don't want to talk about solutions. Well, I do want to talk about solutions, my solution, but actually I want to talk about what you guys do. I want to talk about how you can take where you are now and the idea that you have, if you have an idea to do something or whatever you're doing, how do you make that a reality? And on top of that, especially if it's a tech for good or a social good enterprise or something that is going to fundamentally change our country and our region of the world, how can we improve lives for the people inside this country in a way that can also give us a career, something to bring in money into your own company and your own lives, because you need that in order for you to grow what you do and to survive. So yeah, I mean, that's the stuff that I find really important.
Gavin, before I pass back to Andrea, if you had one takeaway for each member of our audience who are live and also our audience who are going to be watching this in the future, what would it be?
When I first started, bearing in mind, I was working for Guide Dogs until 2015. The company started in 2011. I knew nothing about business, literally nothing. I didn't even want to be a businessman. When I started, I used to get really happy with the happy things, and I'd get really sad with the sad things. So, wow, I've managed to do something. And then the next day I was having to put it into practice. And I'd be like, oh, okay, back down to reality again. And then when something terrible happened, I went, oh no, I heard Microsoft were doing something similar. Of course, they stopped eventually. And then they didn't do it, and they didn't carry on because they didn't have the expertise. But I was thinking every day was like this crazy roller coaster of highs and lows. And the thing that I've learned to do probably better than anything is to just metronomically go through the middle. Allow the people around you to become emotional about things, but just realize that no matter how bad it is, it's going to be better tomorrow if you put the energy and effort and stamina and fortitude into there. But also, no matter how good it is, there's also going to be a down the next day. If you can, find a way of just looking forward to the next bit to control that ability to stay somewhere in the middle. Yeah, get happy, get a little bit sad. These can be used to help you, but don't let them dictate whether you go too far too quick or get too down. Soak up the things that people tell you, soak up the experience. And at the end of the day, it is an experience. We're only on this planet for a short amount of time. We're all going to die. Use the time that you've got here to actually soak up the experiences. And if they're bad or good, they say "if" is the best poem ever. Meet all those things as they're your friends and embrace the experience.
Thank you very much, Gavin. I'm going to pass over to Andrea now. Andrea.
Yes, thanks, Gavin. That was really, really interesting, and so many good messages in there as well, and interesting stories. You could probably tell us a lot more about, what really happened to make this a reality. But we only have so much time, unfortunately.
People can connect with me on LinkedIn. If anybody's got any burning questions afterwards, it's just Gavin Neat, Neate on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to connect people if they've got other questions.
That's great. And yeah, it's such an inspiring story about what, how technology can help. But, as you said, the main thing really is about the people who use the tools that you provide and what it can do to make everyone's life better. So yeah, just to remind everyone, we're looking for feedback from you on the session today. Either use the GoToWebinar feedback opportunity right when the webinar closes, or use our SurveyMonkey link that's on the screen just now to give feedback, or suggestions for other people you would like to see in a future webinar. The people that we have joining our next webinar at the end of the month are Trish and Daniel. They work for the University of the Highlands and Islands, and they will tell us a little bit about their work in active health research, about the expertise and the equipment they have available at the university, and how they're going to be involved with the new Life Sciences Innovation Centre on Inverness campus. So hopefully that will be a very interesting session as well. So looking forward to that. So please look out for the invitations on social media, on email, and join us for that session.
That just leaves me to thank Andrea and Gavin, and also thank you very much to the audience. You asked some cracking questions. Thank you for coming off mute, and we look forward to welcoming you to a future Nexus webinar. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.